And we've got a full contingent of committee, plus we welcome Acting Mayor Donna Gates, Councillor Pauline Young, Councillor Patterson and Councillor Owen Jones as visiting. Thank you. Confirmation of minutes, please. I wasn't here, so I can't move them. Would someone like to move those? Last meeting, Councillor Peter Young, seconded by Councillor Tozer. All those in favour? That's carried. Any conflict of interest declarations, councillors? No, nothing? Good. We do have 4 starred items, 5.1, 6.3, 6.4 and 6.5. Would anyone like to unstar any of the items? Would anyone like to move the starred items? Councillor Tozer moved, seconded by Councillor Peter Young. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We go to 6.1. Councillors, page 20. We got a presentation? No?
Through you, Madam Chair, no presentation today. It was just a discussion on the paper if councillors require.
Any questions? Yep. Any questions, councillors? Yeah. Well, I think it's a really good idea to keep it going, and it will come up in budget, I'm sure. Yeah. I'm happy to move it if someone wants to second that. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Peter Young. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. As we're moving along, 6.2. Have you got anything about?
Again, we heard you had a 4-hour planning meeting, so we thought we'd make this as easy as possible. No presentation. And it's simply, obviously, a background paper just to position where council currently is. We outline a number of proposals that we'll bring forward separately over the next couple of months, dealing with a number of the issues that we raised in the paper. But again, hopefully fairly straightforward, and just happy to take any questions or discussions.
Question, Councillor Tozer.
So on page 35, it talks about this idea of we're a net emitter of carbon as a council, and it talks about us, the amount. It has some estimates. It's not on grey paper or anything, so I'm assuming these estimates, what are the estimates informed by? And would it be reasonable for a service organisation to have 10% of the total carbon emissions in the city?
Through you, Madam Mayor, these estimates are informed by a standard set of calculations. There's often with carbon accounting, there are basically formulas that you can use to convert particular activities into a particular number of CO2 tonnes equivalent. So that's how these numbers are calculated. But again, I'm sure you can appreciate that in terms of those estimates, you can do a back of the envelope calculation, or you can go down to an extremely fine level and account and do calculations for every singular activity, as well as, if you like, going back in the supply chain as far as you can go to also account for carbon and credits that may be in the supply of materials that you actually buy.
Yeah.
So there's various ways to do it. What we're saying is that to move forward and to position council for potential opportunities in the future, it would be appropriate for us to adopt a holistic and well-recognised framework for accounting across the whole of council. Water and Waste currently report some of our emissions through our current reporting frameworks. They in themselves can be tightened up and improved, but as outlined in the paper, we're suggesting that we actually investigate and come back to committee and identify what we believe is an appropriate discipline of accounting.
So on page 36, it says that most of you've got, like, it's got what we actually, what actually contributes to it. Would our move towards things like green organics, does that increase our carbon emissions or does that reduce it?
Well,
Like, if we dig more organic material into the ground, is that, I actually don't know scientifically what that would do.
clearly, it all depends on what you do with it. But our as you see, our largest emissions currently are via burying organic materials in our landfills. That material naturally breaks down, and those gases, including methane, will, if you like, escape to the atmosphere because you can't contain a landfill. If you, for example, instead of putting that organic matter in a landfill and you put it in a closed container, which we would call an anaerobic digester, it does exactly the same thing. It breaks down and produces gases like methane, but because you're in a closed vessel, you can capture 100% of that methane.
And use it for something else.
And use it for something else, power generation, heat, whatever else it is.
Yeah.
So that would mean you would have net zero emissions from that organic matter, whereas if you put it in landfill, about 60% of the emissions go to atmosphere.
So when we talk about net carbon emissions, do we take into account our natural reserve, like a natural city, like the amount of revegetation or even natural revegetation that occurs across our 50% vegetated coverage? Is that captured or not?
It's not captured in these numbers, but certainly can be captured in an appropriate accounting framework.
So when our colleague, Councillor Vorster, talks about planting 20,000 trees, because he's the greenest councillor, apparently, does that, like that tree planting in urban areas, does that count?
That can be counted, absolutely.
But not in this report?
No, that's not counted in this report. And I'll look to Kathy, who's a calculation guru, but in general, a tree planting, you would have to plant a lot of trees
to have an impact on the net.
To have a significant impact, that's correct.
And so
but it should be accounted. If council plants 10,000 trees per year, we should count for those and incorporate those in that accounting framework.
Yeah, I mean, so it occurs to me that the planting of 10,000 trees is actually, whilst an excellent opportunity to have a photo taken, there's a much greater impact for the natural revegetation exercise that occurs across our vast reserve. Like the Lower Beach Conservation Reserve has more than 10,000 trees in it, and there's probably 10,000 trees a month that might naturally seed. I couldn't think of the figures, but it occurs to me that as our natural city grows, just naturally, there is a carbon impact. So there's a measure that would impact our net carbon. What this is here. Is it proposed that the reporting that we're going to do, will it capture that, or will it only be really just a water and waste? I mean, it looks like water and sewage is, I don't know, what is it, 80% of the total. Is it just going to be a report about your operations, or is it the whole?
No,
the whole thing.
Whole of city operations. As I say, we currently account for ours mostly, but what we're proposing is that there's a whole of city standard framework.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Director,
Thank you, Chair.
does the federal government do this sort of as an area-based reporting for themselves with carbon emissions?
Look, we do some reporting to the federal government, and like I said, our reporting goes through the Bureau of Meteorology, and there are others. The Bureau of Statistics collects some data, but no, the federal government doesn't have a complete picture, as Kathy said, not yet. Many jurisdictions and many levels of government are moving towards this sort of arrangement.
Well, they've made a commitment, I guess, to.
Yeah.
Any other questions, councillors? Well, I'm happy that we're looking at it again. 10 years is a long time since the last independent assessment. Anyone like to move the item, councillors? No? Looks like it's the Councillor Tozer and Councillor Young show today. Moved by Councillor Tozer, seconded by Councillor Young. All those in favour? That's carried. We don't have any presentations today. Any general business items, councillors? Gee. I'll have to ring Councillor Call and thank him for having such a long planning meeting because it's made my meeting short. Declare the meeting closed at 2:14.